finding pandemic-proof suburbs. What are they? How can we find them? And what are we actually looking for? Let's look a little bit about what the pandemic has done by way of who it's affected and who has benefited, who has been adversely affected and who has been positively affected or not really affected at all. In general terms, the most impacted people economically and industries include the hospitality industry, including events, tourism, and retail industries. Those people are the customer-facing, direct contact, face-to-face type people. That's their role. And given the pandemic has forced isolation and shutdown, these are the industries most in pain. Generally speaking, they are non-technical roles, direct customer, relying on a physical presence. And these businesses have been forced into closures or have suffered job losses. Businesses that directly support those industries as a second layer, as a second tier of impact, have also been affected, such as the travel industry, direct supplies, for example, napkins, direct supplies to the hospitality and tourism retail industries. Cleaning services, these sorts of support organisations, companies, have also been affected by the closing of businesses and the inability for people to be able to buy and do face-to-face transactions. Some business, in the support field, some businesses have suffered closure, but most of them have had a significant reduction in income. Thus, the conversation around commercial leases and rent conversations and negotiations underway right now. There have been some job losses, but more often a reduction of wages. The third tier of effect as a result of the economic impact from COVID-19 is business suffering from loss, income loss due to stay-at-home requirements. Now, I'm not talking about the people who have had to stay at home and work from home. I'm talking about the impact of telling people to stay at home and not to go out, and therefore not to shop, not to transact, not to meet, not to do what normally other people would do. And there are businesses that aren't directly customer facing, but rely on that interactivity or support that. And these businesses over a period of time have also suffered income loss. The consequence, of course, is not only the direct business income loss, but a reduction in salaries. So there's kind of like three tiers of impact. The first being the most direct, customer facing, shut the business, you're out of work. Second being the support businesses, which are, some of them are closed, reduction of income, let's reinvent. And the third being, we've had an impact because broadly other people have had impacts and it's affected our income. Now, if we have a look at who rather than what industries or what business has been affected, if we have a look at who that's affected most, we find that our youth have been hardest hit. If we look at the change in employment month on month, there has been a 11% drop approximately month on month between March and April for people in the age group of 15 to 24 for employment. And point of interest also, it appears that females have been adversely affected more than males. If we have a look then, now that's that group. And there's a certain that makes sense. Most people who are customer facing, frontline facing for face-to-face relationships are people who are youthful, vibrant, lesser skilled, and starting out in the world, so to speak. And therefore, if they are the people who are affected most, it's logic that they'd be the youth. Flip that around. It appears also, though, as we talk about second and third tier impact, 25 to 34s have kept working but have dropped their hours and therefore dropped their income. So the impact again has worked its way up the corporate ladder or up the business world. As a result of the impact of COVID-19 and the isolation, various government packages and measures have been put in place and offered to assist businesses so that workers can continue to put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. Brilliant. However, this does exclude non-Australian workers, and it does exclude casuals employed for less than a year. So it's not foolproof and people slip through the cracks. The consequence, of course, though, is that the government has not been able to solve all problems for all people. Now, if we have a look at that, then that means that there are a huge number of people who are not earning or don't have an income at all, or are earning minimal amounts. And we're seeing an impact in the property market as a result. Not necessarily on property prices at this stage, but in the tenancies, in rentals. Now, if we have a look at the rent scenario, there has been a significant change in the occupancy of rents around the country. Inner Melbourne rental apartments have been hit the hardest. Month on month change to vacancy rates inner Melbourne has been 36%. So if you compare March to April, about how many vacancies there were in the broader section of inner Melbourne, there has been a 36% increase in the amount of vacancies in dwellings in Melbourne. In Sydney, 34%. Sydney, that's inner and inner south. City and inner south. Sydney eastern suburbs, 22%, and so it moves back. They are massive changes month on month. So interestingly enough, the property market has been impacted by people leaving their rental accommodation. Despite the support required or offered by government, people have been forced to leave. Either they were too slow in money coming from the government to sustain, or there was and the lag time had an effect, or there's a sense of urgency, or they're young enough and mobile enough just to pick up and leave without too much difficulty. We'll talk about that in a second. The impact, though, if we have a look at this, interestingly enough, a graph has been created by CoreLogic. Concentration of workforce in industries highly impacted by COVID-19 and the portion of rental households. So on the left-hand column, you've got the estimated proportion of dwellings that are rentals. So if we have a look, maybe you can see if I get my cursor over there. Where is the cursor? Can't see it, maybe there. If you have a look, inner Melbourne has the highest percentage population of dwellings for renters, for tenants, and that's in the high 60s. And that has been hardest hit with the highest vacancies. And 12% of the workforce actually dwell in those premises. So that's been the hardest hit. So these ones up here are the most, have seen the greatest impact. Okay. So as a consequence of COVID-19, and if we have a look at the broader market and the rental market, as a consequence of COVID-19, we can expect a period of rental consolidation. Those who are agile enough, who don't have the family to pick up and move, who haven't been in the same rental property for a long time, who have limited savings, who are just starting out in life, they can just pick up and move in with their family. They exit their rental property and go home, or they go to their siblings, or they go to their parents, wherever the case may be, but they move out. And what we're seeing across the population is a consolidation of people living in dwellings. So if you were to take a census data today, compare that to, say, 2 months ago, you'll find the per head count per property is higher today than it was, say, 2 months ago. And therefore, we're getting an increase also in shared accommodation. Ultimately, there'll be continued increased demand for purpose-built shared accommodation and decreased demand over a longer period of time for individual rental properties. So we're likely to see yields remain fairly low for single purpose or single family dwellings for a period of time. Recovery will occur, but for a period of time. So if we look at then those suburbs most at risk, those suburbs most likely to have a suburb median price decline include those suburbs with high percentage of non-Australian and short-term casual employed people. Those people employed in the hospitality, retail, tourism, or related supplier industries, particularly in precincts reliant on international travel, major events and shopping centres and major shopping centres. We may see price decline in those which have a high percentage of rental properties, as investors may in fact not necessarily be forced, but be more inclined to put their properties on the market and increase the supply of stock to that market. But we are likely to see price decline in suburbs with high percentages of those younger in age, lesser skilled, lesser educated, on lower income singles or couples. So if you invest in these suburbs, then, or if you're looking to invest and buy in a particular suburb, then it's important to understand the environment that you're buying into, what's happening in that particular suburb. And if you end up buying in one of these, you suffer then a potential increased risk when investing in these suburbs. So let's look at, now that's the downside. Now let's look at the upside. What is occurring on the flip side of this? Conversely, there are groups less affected economically as a result. Now, in general terms, those least impacted economically include government, education, health, essential services, food supplies, infrastructure, and major construction industries. These are the people employed in these functions do not have a direct customer relationship, do not have a face-to-face relationship. They can keep their distance on site. They can manage themselves around face-to-face relationships should that need exist. And social distancing is possible in the workplace. Many of these are outdoors, such as construction. And there's the avenue, and many are supported. So government is doing everything they can to support a safe, healthy environment while keeping people around, or keeping people at home, but still with the infrastructure to be able to work at home without a degradation of income. So there's solutions there for these industries, which has meant that many people have not had to face an income loss and be at home with certainty of continued employment. Quite exciting. In addition, some industries have flourished during this period. Businesses that directly support the above industries have flourished, particularly health, essential services, food supplies, for example, the toilet paper rush. People in toilet paper, or people manufacturing toilet paper, had to increase their production in order to supply to services. And technical businesses supporting stay-at-home employment. So, for example, if you went about 3 weeks ago, month ago, if you went to any hardware supplier for computer equipment, there wouldn't be a chance you'd be able to find a webcam. All webcams were taken off the market and sold, and there was an empty supply. So those people that produce the technical equipment that allows stay-at-home to work more efficiently across the various technical platforms, then these are the sorts of support industries that will have flourished as a result. Continuing. Suburbs that are most likely, therefore, to sustain their median price values include those suburbs that have high percentages of long-term employees employed in government, education, health, essential services, food supplies, and technical industries. They are predominantly owner-occupied with no debt or owner-occupied with a mortgage, but very few or a low percentage of rentals. The population is more mature, educated professionals on higher incomes, and families with primary or secondary children. Now, these are the observations. So as part of the role as Director of Property Predictions, I get to investigate and look at the database around median property price movements and the statistical analysis that supports that. And as what I've seen are these sorts of outcomes in the statistics, particularly families with primary or secondary school children. So let's now go into then how you can pick the right suburb. While we've identified those least likely to work, and we've identified those most likely to be sustained as prices, let's now go into what it takes to actually find those suburbs. And what we need to do is we need to look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics census data. So if I stop sharing now and I raise that, I go back to that, into here, share screen, and share, let's say this one. Excellent. There it goes. You can see what I can see. If you could confirm that you are seeing my screen, that would be great. Let's talk in here. Then we look up census. Look up the census data. Click on that. Easy as, enter. Census comes up. I better move that out of the way for the moment. Click on the census, opens the page. Thank you for acknowledging that people are seeing this. That's great. Click in here. Now, I had a quick look, and I'm going to look for Macquarie Hills, M-A-C-Q-U-A-R. I'll have to keep spelling it. I-E-H, Macquarie Hills. So when you're looking at the census data, you want to pick a suburb only. You don't want a whole region, you just want the suburb. If we're going to pick the suburb only, we need to go for State Suburb SSC, click that, press go, and then what we end up is with the census data. Now, we are after a couple of things, and there's some power in the statistics I'm about to show you. Now, this was due to finish at 7:30. We might be going a little bit over since it's now 7:20. So I just raise that alarm. If you hang back, there'll be the big climactic finish, which will help you to see what you need to do going forward. So won't be too long. We'll see how it plays. All right, so if we look at Macquarie Hills, we can see the broad data, but then we scroll down into different data. And what we see is that in the age groups, this is an environment where you've got 5 to 9 being one of the most predominant, 0 to 4, 5 to 9, predominant age groups. So we're talking primary school children with parents aged 30 to 40 years. So these are stable environments. If we continue to scroll down, we can see that we've got reasonable levels of education, bachelor degree, certificate 3, education levels. We have, scrolling down further, as we work our way down, mostly represented by professionals, so not frontline, not sales workers, not community, not labourers. We're talking professional workers, followed up by clerical administrative workers. So they're not frontline facing people, in which case there's the viability of this might work. They are located in and predominantly work as an idea in hospitals or primary education as the two leading industries of employment, top responses, which is, albeit the sample size being quite small, is quite strong as a reliable source of revenue for that particular suburb. If we keep going down, we keep scrolling down, we get into dwellings, and we have a look at owned outright. There are 340 owned outright. Let me move that. Oh, come on, you can do it. There we go. There are 340 owned outright, 607 with a mortgage. Now, 31%, excuse me, 31% are owned outright, averages as Australia. Owned with a mortgage is 55%, significantly higher. So there's a lot of people owner-occupiers. Rented is quite small. So there is a reliability in price in this environment. Given that the financing is all about supporting people with their homes such that they, and encouraging banks to, should there be an income loss or an income hit or and a difficulty to pay, there's a moratorium for banks to be able to put their interest payments on hold for a period of time and extend the loan potentially. So there is an encouragement by the government not to sell. And implication then is this is more stable and less pressured than, say, a suburb with a higher rental volume. Cool. Now, let's then move back to the presentation. All right, lovely. Okay, so now let's talk about growth potential. Growth potential, let's talk about a little bit about median price movement and what causes median price movement. Now, in this environment of the pandemic, you would have heard lots of news about what's happening in the market and of a mass variety of different perspectives around what it is that is likely to be occurring in the market. And a lot of this is based on some common misconceptions. For those who have not done the investigation, followed through, or done the analysis, there can be a perception that property prices will fall during a recession, or that property prices fall when the stock market crashes, or property prices fall when unemployment is high. While these three events do influence sentiment, they are an indirect impact on property prices per se. The most direct impact on what property suburb median prices is supply and demand, or in property terms, listings and sales. So let's have a look at the contributing factors of what supplies, or factors of supply or of listings. Okay. People can choose to sell when markets are good and they're happy to relocate somewhere cheaper or downsize. They can choose to sell when there's a significant financial win that they've come into, either a new job, pay rise, inheritance. They need to sell when something significant changes. For example, surprise, we're expecting, or the children are growing, we need to expand the house, there's just not enough room for 4 of us anymore. There's a new job in a distant location, or there are extended family needs that says you need to live closer to these people and therefore moving is a requirement for health reasons perhaps. When something significant like that occurs, then people need to sell. So the market conditions under those circumstances carry little weight. The last point about when people need to sell is when there's a financial difficulty and they are unable to service the current debt. All right, so let's go through each of these right now. Market prices are not in growth. We have had stories about anxiety around decline. Right now, prices are actually relatively flat across the country. Melbourne's down a little, Sydney's flat, Brisbane's up, Adelaide's up, Perth's down a little. So we can't really declare that there is a massive growth for people to be big on the desire of selling for a financial gain because they can. There's very few significant financial wins, very few, and again, media broadly. Jobs are an issue, pay rises are particularly difficult, pay cuts are quite commonplace. Inheritance, let's not go down that path. It's politically insensitive to do so right now, but there's the possibility that may play out somewhere along the line, but not right here and not right now. There is always going to be significant changes for individuals. We don't know what they are, and on an individual, personal, family level, there will be change. So there's always going to be movement within the property market, buying and selling because of these reasons. Very, very personal ones and non-market specific. Interestingly enough, though, if we have a look at it, the idea that people are unable to service the current debt, it's interesting. Interest rates have come down, and the requirement for people to be able to service a massive debt has been alleviated by the fact that interest rates are lower, and therefore the burden of coming up with the right amount of money every month has been minimised. However, there is a loss of income for many people. That loss of income in this instance, though, has been offset by the ability for banks to put a holiday on loan repayments. So there is the capacity, while I may not be earning as much, while I may be doing it financially difficult right now as a temporary measure, with a belief that within 6 months I'll be over that and the environment is likely to have shifted, or with the belief that the government will continue to support beyond the end of the 6-month period, albeit maybe not to the same amount, but in some way. There is less burden on being able to service debt even though I'm unable to. So it may not have that impact right now, which means that the pressure is off. To that extent, then, what we're finding is that listings at the initial outset on the 16th of May when the restrictions began, the listings came down, bottomed out, had Easter, came up and have gradually risen back up into a more normal type range. So in here, we class this between April and May on the blue line, we class this as a shortage of listings. Now, at the time, the shortage of listings was brilliant for the preservation of value. But we are now at a point where real estate agents are back at work. You're able to go and see properties, and therefore people are coming back out into the market again and say, now I can potentially sell. Cool. So now I've got questions. I will get to the questions at the end of this webinar, if that's okay. So they are all recorded. I will be with you shortly. Contributing factors for demand. So let's talk about demand. So people can choose to buy when suburb prices are rising. Good environment, I'm in. They can feel confident about their finance. That also allows them to go, yep, I'm willing to buy. Job loss risks appear low. Interest rates are low. This is a great financial environment for me to be buying in. Or they've had a significant financial win, new job, inheritance, tax lotto, pay rise, whatever the case may be, but a financial confidence to be able to go and purchase the bigger and the better property. People need to buy when something significant changes. Again, extra child, growing children, job in new location, extended family needs. So let's go through each of those and what might be happening right now. Right now, suburb prices aren't rising, so there's not a real enthusiasm for people to get into the market today for an immediate outcome. However, there is a common understanding that we are bottoming out. If now I say common understanding, people have a different perspective, but we'll go through that shortly. Feeling confident about their finance. This is a very, very selective position. Job loss appears low. For many people who are on the benefit side, job loss does appear low. For many people who are on the consequence side, job loss is obviously quite imminent and quite a high anxiety. Here's my question. Who's more likely to be buying? Those in this environment that have retained their jobs and therefore there is a confidence with them, or those who are customer facing who potentially, if we equate the group of people who are customer facing and what their roles are and their age, their skill level, would they be buying properties potentially anyway? Now, yes, the market was moving that way, but it's stopped dead for the moment. So those people who are older, more experienced, more skilled, able to retain their job, and could have bought property anyway, can still buy property now. So the ability to buy isn't necessarily limited for a select group of people. Interest rates being low is a significant win, and that will carry long into the future. 7:31, a few more minutes. Have anybody had a significant financial win? Those on the right side of the fence have. Obviously, there's not. And people need to buy when something significant changes. That's always going to be the case. Now, for all these listing and supply contributing factors and the demand contributing factors, the basic truth is that property prices are most affected by the availability of finance. Interest rates right now are low, lending policies are right now competitive, and there is a capacity for a select group of people who have remained employed to be able to service debt. And those who are unable are able to hold off servicing debt so they're not forced to sell. So what we're seeing in the banks at the moment are some lenders are becoming a little more conservative and they are lowering their LVRs and not offering 90-95% lends as they once were not so long ago. Income verification has become a greater focus for these lenders. And LMI restrictions may exist such that we don't do 95 and 90% lends anymore. We might do 85 and 80. But there is still competition between lenders and they are fighting for business from those eligible to be able to borrow money. In fact, that they are offering incentives for people to be able to buy and to change banks and win business. So given that the availability of finance is one of the key components to price impact, let's look at the availability or the new mortgages. If we have a look at new mortgages, Australia was going extraordinarily well until such time as the restrictions started to come into play. We were hit hard with a bit of a shock factor leading into Easter. Coming out of Easter, we have kind of plateaued in the number of new mortgages, meaning we're seeing listings and number of sales about balancing out. In fact, what we're seeing, which is playing out in the broader market, we are seeing a flattening off of median house prices. So for all the decline that was the story of tales of woe, it's actually incredibly unlikely for that to occur. There is too much in play to support median house price. And because there is a indirect influence on median house prices by unemployment, recessions and stock market crashes, because it's indirect, not direct. And finance is all about being able to have property be purchased. We are looking pretty reasonable. So if we look ahead then, the projected median price forecast as we see it through property predictions is going to look something along these lines. There may be a decline, and again, there's a scale of accuracy here. There may be a decline, but it's likely to be nominal and not dramatic. There are arguments that say that there will be no decline by some economists and property market experts. There are others suggesting that we're looking for a 30% drop. The odds of a 30% drop are minuscule. The odds of a flat market are actually significantly greater than a significant drop. So I'm anticipating somewhere in the under 10%, probably 4 to 5% drop over a period of around 6 months to, probably around 6 months, such that next year into the March autumn season, we'll be doing okay.